some of the listeners might be saying, well, who's Justin Snodgrass? And who is this guy? And I want to just give a little bit of background. When Mike and I were in the process of editing our film, I don't even remember. I mean, it's been so long ago how I came up across that one drawing. I don't know is it a drawing or painting of you in the chair with Tom's book,
Yeah.
My Big Toe?
Yeah, it's a charcoal drawing.
Charcoal drawing. Yeah, I saw this, and I don't remember if maybe you had posted it up on Tom's forum or if it was on social media or something tagged, but I immediately was like, oh my God, we have to use this. We have to use this for the film. This is going to go in a perfect place, when Tom's talking about the hemisync music, because you have the earphones on in the picture, and you're kind of elevated and looks like to be coming up and out of your body. And I remember that we just emailed you, contacted you, said, hey, can we use this for our film? And you were like, absolutely.
Yeah, I was totally excited that you wanted to use it. So it's been, whenever I rewatch the movie, I kind of forget that it's in there, and it'll pop up, and I get kind of confused for a minute. It's like, oh yeah, that's right. The drawing's in the movie. That's great.
Yeah. So for those of you who have seen Beyond the Physical or have not yet, you can look for the cameo appearance of Justin's art. And then I guess, through the years, we've just kind of, kept in touch through Facebook, social media. And one of our friends, Garrick, recently approached us to let us know that you had written a thesis for your master's degree. Is that correct?
Right. That's correct. Yes.
Yeah. And it has just some great stuff in there about your personal experiences with out-of-body experiences, lucid dreaming. And then I really liked how you tied in some of Tom Campbell's My Big Toe theory and other physicists. And it was just fascinating to read. You're an excellent writer, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
And really, really enjoyed it. So we were hoping that we can talk a little bit about some of your experience, and just being a fan of the show and, following us as well. We always like to hear about other people's out-of-body experiences and lucid dreaming and things of that sort. So maybe you can bring the listeners on your journey of how you kind of began this consciousness exploration for yourself.
Sure. The pivotal moment that turned me into a seeker happened when I was 18 or 19, and I think I was either just finishing my senior year in high school, or maybe it was the summer after. But I was down at the baseball fields of our small town with a friend, and it was nighttime, and we both saw a UFO in the sky. And it was, the type of experience that was completely mind-blowing, and you couldn't explain it by any natural means. And in fact, right after it had happened, what it was is these giant lights in the sky. And at first we didn't notice it. We just kind of noticed this strange blue and red hue inside of the truck. And eventually we looked up to trying to figure out where this light was coming from, and we just saw these massive white lights in the sky. It was a giant row right above the truck that we were parked in. And the lights would blink for a while, then they would vanish and reappear in a completely different part of the sky and blink over there for a while in sort of these random patterns. So it just jumped across, miles and miles of sky instantaneously. And we had our windows down. It was summer or late spring, so it was completely silent. So this went on for probably, 3 or 4 minutes maybe, and then it finally just vanished for good. And so we both just kind of sat there completely stunned, not really sure what to say or do about it. And it was a couple minutes after that a little single-engine plane flew overhead. And I'm not sure how high up it was, but it was, it was low enough that you could make it out, and you could make out the port and starboard red and green lights on it. And, in comparison, it really put it into perspective, because the plane was really small, it was moving really slow, and it was really loud. So that it's almost gave me a little bit of evidential data that I didn't just make up what we had seen. So that stuck with me for obviously the rest of my life. And from there, I went on and joined the Navy. I was kind of a troublemaker in high school, I guess you could say. So I didn't have a lot of direction at that time. So I figured, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I just thought, well, I'll join the Navy and see the world. So once I got into the Navy, I kind of discovered reading for the first time. I laugh and I tell my kids this all the time, that I don't think I ever actually finished a book all the way through throughout grade school and high school. I think I read some of Huckleberry Finn and, didn't finish it, and maybe some of the Scarlet Letter I think we had to read. But it wasn't until the Navy that I read, I think it was a book about Jim Morrison or the Doors. And I was just really intrigued that there's a ton of information in reading a book, and you can really learn a lot from reading a book, and just kind of the experience of sitting down and zoning out and going into another world as you read a book. So I kind of got hooked on reading, and that eventually led to reading books about spirituality. I read some books about Buddhism, the Tibetan book of Living and Dying. I read the Bible, and it's sort of this big this big excitement opened up inside of me of trying to uncover who I was and why I was here, and what reality really was all about. So I continued reading and reading. I started meditating, and normally what I would do is I would go up on top of the upper deck of the ship at nighttime when we were out at sea, and I'd take my chair up there. And it's a perfect place to meditate because it's completely dark outside. You have the hum of the ocean and the waves splashing and the engines kind of rumbling underneath you. And the ship's got a gentle rock to it. So I really enjoyed that, and it helped me get into some pretty good meditative states. But one particular night I was feeling pretty frustrated and overwhelmed at not really coming up with any answers. I had all this information after a couple of years of just burying myself in books, but I hadn't really come to any solid conclusions yet. So I was feeling pretty down and out about it. So, with tears in my eyes, I just started saying, please show me the way. I want to know the truth. I want to know why I'm here. I want to know everything. And so the lesson I learned from that is you kind of have to be careful what you ask for sometimes, because I started having, from there, my life kind of got really, really weird. I started having a lot of synchronistic events happen to me on a daily basis. I started having spontaneous lucid dreams, which, even though I'd read all these books, a lot of them were more, I guess, philosophical and, things like the Celestine Prophecy. I think I read Raymond Moody, but somewhere nowhere in there did I come across the terms lucid dreaming or out of body, so I really didn't know much about it or that it was even possible. So when it happened to me, it really blew my mind, because I woke up thinking, my gosh, does everybody know about this? Like, if they do, why aren't they talking about it? This is crazy. You can wake up in your dreams and play around and do all sorts of things. So the lucid dreams kind of continued spontaneously, and I started keeping a dream journal, which now I know is a perfect way to have more lucid dreams. But along with that, I started getting sleep paralysis on a pretty regular basis. So you can imagine, in a span of 3 years, I just buried myself in all this existential thinking and deep thoughts, and it became overwhelming, and all these new experiences. So the sleep paralysis generated a lot of fear in me, because I felt like I was getting in over my head. So the sleep paralysis went on for many, many months, until finally I was basically just sick and tired of being afraid of it. I would go to bed at night, and it would happen 3 or 4 times a night, sometimes 4 times a week. So I got to the point where I dreaded going to bed at night, because it was so frightening, and I had no idea what was happening. So eventually one night I said, you know what? If it happens, then the next time it happens, I'm just going to completely give into it. I'm tired of being afraid. If I die or if something happens, that's fine. I'm just going to go ahead and just let it happen. And so the next time it happened, I did just that. And of course, the sensations built, and it got really intense. And, sleep paralysis is funny, because if you let it go like that, it gets to a point where it feels like it's building so strongly that it's almost like you're going to explode. So it got to that point, but, right before it hits the pinnacle, I had the sensation of lifting up out of my body. And of course, everything got really silent and peaceful and quiet. And I lifted up through kind of the pipework of the ship and up above the ship, and then found myself shooting through a tunnel. And of course, I had my full awareness with me, and I was just thinking, what is this? Like, wait a minute, what's going on? I can't figure out where I am, and this feels real. So all these thoughts are kind of racing through my mind as I'm shooting through this tunnel. And eventually I ended up in a black void, which is now, I understand to be, for me anyway, it's a common occurrence with out of body and lucid dreaming, but it's that kind of dense, three-dimensional black void of nothingness, where you're just existing as kind of a point of awareness. So I ended up in that void, and I started to kind of wonder, did I die in my sleep, or did something happen that I'm not in my body anymore? So of course, the first thing that came to my mind was I want to see God. I want to meet God, because at that time, like I said, I'd been reading the Bible, and I kind of had this idea that there was a higher power guiding me along. So that was the first thing that popped in my mind. But as soon as I finished thinking that thought, I was shot back to my body immediately, and woke up in my Navy bunk, completely stunned, wondering what in the world was that. Um, and I that was kind of the that was the first out of body experience, and then it didn't happen for quite a few years after that. I kind of ignored it because it scared me a little bit. I went back to lucid dreaming, and things continued to be pretty strange. There was a lot of sort of random paranormal events. In my thesis, I talk about the one where I kind of spontaneously remote viewed my friend's identification card. And I had had some experiences when I went home on leave where I found that I could seemingly communicate with animals telepathically. One example is I was at a friend's house and I was trying to communicate to the dog to come sit on my lap. And it was this big Great Dane, and I thought it'd be kind of funny if he actually did it. Well, a minute later he came and sat on my lap, and my friend came in going, "What's he doing? He never does that." And, so you get enough of these little bits of evidence that you have to be skeptical about. But when the pile of all those little bits gets big enough, you start to realize that there's something else going on. There's some kind of guidance, and there's some other story than what you maybe previously thought. So that kind of rocked my world, all those experiences in the Navy. And then once I got out of the Navy, I got married and, of course, had kids. And, things kind of slow down when that all happens, and it's a whole new adventure. So I still continue to have kind of sporadic events throughout, I guess it would have been about a 9 or 10 year span. So maybe once every 2 months or once a month, I'd have a lucid dream or an out-of-body experience. And at that time, even during that span of 10 years, I still hadn't really come across the terms lucid dreaming or out of body or sleep paralysis. So it was all still kind of mysterious to me. And I, for the most part, thought that I was just kind of exploring my own psyche or my own subconscious. But I hadn't really considered that it might actually be some other reality and, actually interacting with other beings or anything like that. So I didn't take it too seriously. But then I guess it was 2008. I was on the computer doing something, and there was a TV special on, and it was Stephen LeBerg talking about his research into lucid dreaming. And as soon as I heard the term lucid dreaming, I thought, that's it. That's the word. That's what I've been doing, because it's, you're lucidly aware in a dream. That's got to be it. So I, went over to the TV and watched the special and ordered his book right away, Exploring the World of Lucid Dreaming, devoured that book and was totally excited that I kind of now had a plan to control these experiences that I've had. And I kind of had a label for it. I, read what sleep paralysis was, read about lucid dreaming, and kind of had an idea what was going on. So for the next 2 years, I dove into lucid dreaming and practiced all the techniques. I still avoided what I think is called, wake-induced lucid dreaming, where you go through sleep paralysis to enter a lucid dream, because I still was scared to death of sleep paralysis and found it completely uncomfortable. So I avoided that and did mostly, the techniques where you wake and go back to bed and you set your intent at night, and got to be pretty proficient at it, where if I had the time to put steady effort into it, I could probably have 3 or 4 lucid dreams in a week on a good week. So I did that for about 2 years, and in doing that, I started to research more about lucid dreaming and different techniques, and I started becoming active on a couple of the different lucid dreaming sites just to get information. And the term out of body and astral projection kept coming up like in advertisements, and people would mention it, and I just kind of set it aside as maybe a little bit too new agey and weird for me, and I just thought, I categorized it under witchcraft and stuff I don't really want to mess with. But eventually I saw it enough that I somehow ended up with Bob Monroe's book in my lap. I think I must have just ordered it on a whim or something. But I read Bob's book, and it, of course, completely shocked me, because I realized, now, wait a minute, this guy's describing some of the same experiences that I've had, since way back when in the Navy, but he's saying that he's calling them out-of-body experiences, where Stephen LeBerg is calling them lucid dreams. So I was kind of stuck wondering, well, which one am I having? Am I just playing around in my own subconscious and psyche, or am I actually somewhere else, going to places that maybe I ought not be, kind of like a toddler running around a machine shop unaware of all the dangers? So it added kind of a new element of fear. that maybe it was actually real, and these events and places were a lot more real than I had previously thought. But I still wanted to know. I mean, even though I was frightened by it, I had to know more about it. So I just kept going with the lucid dreaming, and then I started using sleep paralysis, as Stephen LeBurga suggested, to enter a lucid dream state. And of course, it just kind of depends on your perspective. You could get to a lucid dream through sleep paralysis and call it a lucid dream, or you could enter sleep paralysis or a vibrational state and have what you might call an out-of-body experience. And so I think the one, I guess, advantage that I had in terms of understanding maybe a bigger picture of some of this is that I didn't really know any of those terms until 2008. So I just had the experience and I didn't really know how to categorize them. So when I did learn the terms out-of-body, lucid dreaming, sleep paralysis, I realized that they were all describing or at least lucid dreaming, astral projection, and out-of-body were describing all of my experiences. So the boundaries became really fuzzy. And that's one thing that later on, when I've read My Big Toe and listened to some of Tom's interviews and asked him questions about it, I realized at least from what I can tell, and I know a lot of the experts even might disagree, there's no real distinction between the two, out-of-body and lucid dreaming, and also to include astral projection. It's so subjective of an experience. If you believe you're having a lucid dream and that you have to go back to your body and then project from your body, well, that's the expectation that you're setting, and that's probably what you're going to have to do to make it happen, or else it won't happen, because your expectation sets the reality of the experience. So I feel lucky in that I didn't have a lot of those expectations before having the experiences. So when I started reading, after I read Bob's book, of course, I was hooked and started reading all the Robert Bruce and William Buellman and some of the other lucid dreaming books. I can't think of the author's name right now. You guys just had him on your show. Let's see, Wagner is his last name?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. I really enjoyed his book, but what I noticed from his book is I felt like he was approaching it as an out-of-body experience, but just giving it a different name. He was kind of approaching it as a way to uncover truths about himself and to kind of as a way to evolve. So with all that in mind, for myself, I've kind of come to the conclusion that there's really only two primary states of being while we're centered here in this physical reality. And that the first one is when you're focused in your body, doing your daily activities and interacting with the physical world. And the second one is pretty much anytime you're not doing that, when you're doing something and you're not aware of or not connected to your physical body. And from the best that I can tell, there's no real distinction. And that includes when you're maybe doing a remote viewing session, let's say sitting at a desk and you're just meditating and you get absorbed in the visuals and the information that you're receiving. You're not aware of your body when you're doing that for the most part. You're mostly tuned in to that other state. So for all intents and purposes, that in and of itself is an out-of-body experience, or at least it's a non-physical experience. So I've learned to kind of categorize either it's a physical experience or a non-physical experience. And of course, you can have, there's a spectrum in between where you can be tuned in to some of one and some of the other, which might be the case maybe with a lot of people that do intuitive work or healing or even channeling. So after I sort of got into this out-of-body thing, I kept stumbling on some of Tom Campbell's videos. And I laugh now because at first I thought, who's this guy? He's some kind of eccentric scientist. He's going to solve everything with an equation and, math magician type of thing. But I kept seeing his name pop up and kept seeing his videos. So I finally watched a couple of them and I thought, wait a minute, this sounds really interesting. So I ordered his book, and his book completely blew me away. All of the things that I had almost come to, all of the conclusions that I had almost made throughout all the experiences and reading and deep thinking about the meaning of life and that kind of stuff, he kind of finished my sentences for me and my thought for me and made it into a complete whole. So any gaps that I had, My Big Toe kind of easily filled them in. So suddenly I had this really big picture of all of my experiences, all of the strange experiences, and also the everyday experiences, the struggles of life. And I found that the ideas that I had started to come to on my own were basically the same as My Big Toe. Of course, My Big Toe was, a multitude more thorough and based on a lot more experience. But I really latched onto it for that. And that was probably 2010, I think, that I first read it. And since then, I've, basically, I guess you could say, been a, close follower of Tom, and really have been able to apply a lot of the fundamental concepts of My Big Toe to my personal life. And to look back at 2010 when I first read the book, and to look at my life now, I feel like I've lived a complete lifetime in just that 5 or 6 years. I feel like a completely different person. I have a completely different motivation, even though it's still basically the path of seeking and trying to uncover truth. It's a lot more powerful and a lot more active, I guess I could say. And those kind of things they really have a big effect on you when you fully engage the schoolhouse, I guess you could say. When you start to become a good student who pays attention and, wants to learn and grow, you start to get fed, I think, a lot of nudges and a lot of help. And the more that comes, the more you grow, and the more you grow, the more you want to grow. And then it kind of just compounds on itself. And so now like I said, I've been following Tom's work for 5 or 6 years, and I help out with the fireside chats that he does every month and really enjoy that. And the latest thing that I got to do, which was really exciting, was to go to the Monroe Institute for his first My Big Toe intensive 6-day program that he did. And that was a huge milestone, I think, or it's going to be a huge milestone for me in terms of what the future is going to bring. So that's pretty much the long version of me.
Yeah, and how was his intensive? And how is it different from watching his videos or interacting with him online and actually being there? And was there an experiential part of it, or was it full lecture?
Yeah, that's a good question. And that was kind of when I first saw that he was going to be doing it. My first question was, oh, wow, is he going to be guiding these meditation sessions in the check units that Monroe has? And that's pretty much what it was. I mean, he did some lecturing and some question and answer. And I feel like he said a lot, maybe said some more things that he might not say in a public forum. Not that they were secrets or anything, but I think it was more specific to the 23 or 24 people that were there. So there was a lot of good information. But for the most part, it was experiential. I mean, we were in the check units probably, let's see, I want to say twice in the morning, once in the afternoon, and maybe once in the evening. So 4 or 5 times a day. And of course, you have the usual follow-up afterwards. You meet back down in the living room or whatever they call it, I forget, and you discuss your experiences and whatnot. And that's only been my second program at Monroe. The first one was William Buellman's, which was absolutely great. But I think just because Tom has had such a profound impact on my life, I was a little bit more excited about the My Big Toe one. So in that regard, I had really high expectations going in, and they were completely met 1,000-fold. I mean, I really felt like I was at Hogwarts Castle, and I had to go back home to the real world when it was all over. And I think a lot of the other people there had the same feeling. I mean, there was a lot of breakthroughs for people. I mean, there was a lot of tears shed, a lot of happiness. It was a really, really powerful experience. And I think that's common at Monroe, but I kind of feel like this might have been at a different level, so to speak. And of course, meeting Tom in person as opposed to seeing it on video was pretty, it was intense. I mean, I don't really know how to explain it other than you feel like you're standing in the presence of a guru.
Yeah.
And I hate to even say that, but he just has such a powerful presence, and he's so crystal clear. I feel like I almost don't even have to speak to him. I can just stand there and he knows what I'm trying to say or what I mean to say. And, he has that ability when he answers questions directly. He kind of knows what you're asking, even if you don't.
Right.
Yep.
So it was a really powerful experience, met a lot of great people. And I kind of had a big breakthrough for me because for the last, I guess it's been 3 years, I've been hung up on trying to learn how to transition from this state that I'm in right now to an out-of-body state. In other words, go lay down, be fully conscious, pass through the vibrational state right into an out-of-body experience. Because for me, it's always been a lapse in awareness. I've come close where I've meditated, for 45 minutes and taken the headphones off, been in a good state, fallen asleep, and then waking up some minutes later in vibrational state or sleep paralysis, and then been able to go and, have an adventure. But I really wanted to not have that lapse in awareness. I wanted to understand like the process of the transition so that I could basically master it, so that it wouldn't be so haphazard. And I think this is the case for a lot of people. It's pretty hit and miss with a lot of these techniques. Sometimes it's easy and you get out and you have this vivid, crisp, amazing experience and you're talking to beings and things are happening and you wake up and write it down. Then there's other times, and at least for me and from talking to other people, it's this way. You might wake up in sleep paralysis and you're trying to get out of your body, but you can, and finally you do, and then you're stuck kind of tumbling in darkness, and maybe you land in your hallway finally, but you can't quite get things to be clear, and you try all the techniques, clarity now, and clapping your hands and spinning, and it just doesn't work. So I wanted to understand how to get there easily so that I could start to unravel why those inconsistencies are there. And so I've been, working on that for off and on for 3 years, not full time, obviously, because I have kids and whatnot. So I, doing an hour and a half meditation session in the middle of the day is not practical. So I squeeze it in when I can. Tom had always said that transitioning from here to there is just, snap of the fingers. It takes 1/10 of a second and you're there. And I always thought, well, okay, maybe, but I want to understand the process. And what I wasn't hearing him say, or what I didn't register, was he was saying there is no process. There is nothing to do. The only process is the one that you create for yourself.
Right.
And I thought, well, okay, but I want to learn the process. I was stubborn, just like I didn't get it. So when we were at the Monroe Institute with Tom, I was about halfway through the week, and I was getting into good meditative states. I was getting vibrations, and I felt really clear, like I was making progress, but I just couldn't get to that next step to transition. And there's people talking about, oh, I went here and I did this, and I went here and I did that, and I healed my sister in Utah, and I'm thinking, okay, but are they going and doing this, or is this more of a mental practice? Because my belief, which I've kind of starting to unravel now, was that it had to be vivid, crisp, and real for it to be real. It had to have that feeling of you're actually there somewhere, engaged in an environment. And I really kind of knew better in light of Tom's work, because in the non-physical there really is no quote-unquote environment, and you don't have eyes and ears or taste buds. It's all interpreted data that we're interpreting based on our habits here. And I knew all that, but I just, I was being stubborn and just not quite hearing it. So anyway, I had an experience where Tom basically, I told him I was frustrated, I'm having a hard time, and he said, just let go of everything you're trying to do and just let it happen. And I think the key thing that I had started to figure out previously, that Tom verified for me, is that sometimes it requires you to kind of play around. You get into a good meditative state, and you might start getting hypnagogic images and those sort of things. And he kind of gave me permission to start playing around with some of it. Ask a question and just see what I get back. And of course, my mode of thinking was, well, if I get something back, it might be real, it might not be real. I want it to be real, so I have to be there to experience it. But he kept saying, no, just start playing around and just see what you get and let go of all your expectations. So finally, I did that in a session. I just said, okay, I'm going to forget about all of it. I'm just going to get into a good meditative state. I'm going to pretend like I'm directly interacting with what he would call the larger consciousness system. And so I'm playing around, I'm asking questions, and I started, the visuals started to get a little stronger. I was getting like a green light on my right side and the blackness behind my eyes when the answer was yes, and a red light when it was no. And then it would kind of waver in between if it was maybe. And then I started kind of to get an intuitive sense of what these different symbols and metaphors were supposed to mean. Yes, no, maybe, or, figure it out yourself, those kind of things. But then I thought, okay, this is fun, but how do you know if it's really happening or not? But then I got an image of one of the participants in the program, and I thought, okay, and what's that about? And then I started getting an image of what I understood to be his mom. And I got certain clues certain clues that I was supposed to tell this person to verify that it was his mom. And I was asking these questions. Am I supposed to tell him about this? And I got the green light, yes. What else should I tell him? And then I got information about, one of the examples was I got the idea of ring and diamond, but I was kind of confused because it wasn't diamond ring. It was just ring and diamond together, but kind of separate. So I wrote that down when I got out, and a few other things that I probably won't mention because it might be too personal for him. But some evidential bits. And what's funny is I'm pretty adamant about not coming out of the check unit early. Like I stick it out to the very end, and regardless if it's going good or bad for me. So I got this really strong sudden sense that I was supposed to get up right then and get out of the check unit early. And so I asked, am I supposed to get out really? And then I got the green light, like a siren going off in my vision. So I said, okay, I got up, got out of the check unit, walked down the hall, and of course everyone else is still in their units. And as soon as I turn the corner to go downstairs, this person comes out of his check unit or out of his room and meets me in the hallway. And I thought, oh, geez, this is too much. So I told him, I said, hey, I kind of like to talk to you when you're done. He got out to use the restroom. He just had this, uncontrollable urge to use the restroom. Of course, at the right time, right?
Right.
And so he met me back downstairs, and I felt comfortable telling him because I felt like there was some evidence there that what was going on in my session was real. So I wanted to go ahead and talk to him. So we talked about it. We both, were in tears. There was a lot of meaning for him. There was a lot of connections. And when I asked him about the ring and the diamond as two separate things, he showed me this big gold kind of, it looked like a class ring or a Super Bowl ring, that kind of thick gold ring. And in the middle of it, he had placed his mom's diamond from her ring that she had worn, all of her life or all of her marriage. So, I got chills in the back of my neck and thought, okay, this is the system telling me that's the way you're supposed to do it. You need to quit banging your head against the wall like an idiot, trying to figure out the process when there is no process. So that was a big breakthrough for me. And now of course, I'm back to reality with kids and soccer games and all this. So I'm trying to get back into my meditation sessions and practice it. And I've done it, a handful of times since the program. And I'm still getting the green and red light and these sort of different symbols and metaphors. And a few of them have had evidential data. So I'm kind of in the mode now of taking that to the next step and seeing where that leads me. But I'm glad that I don't have to keep trying to figure out a process that probably doesn't exist.
That's pretty interesting. I see some parallels with my experience growing up,
right.
And the last several years or so. I don't know if I've ever said it on the show, but I had the UFO experience as well.
Oh, really? Nice.
Yeah, actually a few times. I've never connected it with spirituality and this, altered consciousness, states of consciousness.
Right.
But I don't know, maybe it was because I had a very Catholic upbringing, so I always kept, and I was a big X-Files fan, so I always kept, the UFO stuff, that whole thing, I always kept it separate.
Right.
But yeah, and then, later on in life, when I woken up to Tom and William and this whole subject matter, if you go on the internet now and you can see a connection with the UFOs and these other
right
beings out there. But anyway, I don't want to go too far down another rabbit hole. But
no, it's a good topic, and I've had a couple people have read my thesis and asked me, and I think they were both familiar with Tom's work. So they were asking me, so do you think it was really an unidentified flying object and aliens? And, or do you think it was just kind of a nudge from the system saying, wake up, reality's bigger than what you think. And I tend to think that for me specifically, it was kind of a nudge. I like to think that anyway. I have no idea, of course, but it seems likely that was the case if I look at the chain of events that it kind of kicked off. But then I've also had someone that's an intuitive tell me that I was actually, my memory was wiped out and I was taken up to another spaceship and they're involved in my life now. So I'm open to that too. I mean, it could make sense, but I think a lot of from what I've seen on watching some of the alien abduction stories, I think a lot of it are really, or alien encounters, not just specifically abductions. I think a lot of them are altered states of consciousness where people are tapping into other realities and also tapping into their own fears intermixed with those other realities. I know that's been the case for me with sleep paralysis a lot of the times. There's always the sensation that there's some looming figure in the room and there's feet steps and A lot of people, report all kinds of different things, kind of depending on their culture and their beliefs. But I tend to think a lot of the nighttime alien abductions could be a result of sleep paralysis. But also, if you take seriously the idea that there is this larger consciousness system and we're just a very small blip in some dark corner somewhere, you can imagine if you look at our Earth just by itself and look at all the different species of spiders and, I don't know, snails and dogs and cats and people, it would make sense that the larger consciousness system, not just our universe, but the entire system is just full of every imaginable type of thing that, could exist that we could imagine, really. So the idea that some of that interacts with us as it's allowed or as it's able to makes a lot of sense to me. So I think it could be a blend of all of them. Maybe there are aliens in this universe that have made contact. It doesn't seem that likely just based on the physical rules of our reality, but it's not impossible, I would say. So I think it probably is a mixture of all of those things.
That's interesting how you brought up how it was kind of like a signal for you once you saw the UFO. Have you've heard of Bashar?
Oh yeah,
channel. Yeah. He I can't remember the guy's name that channels Bashar. Daryl.
Daryl. Anyway,
Yeah,
Daryl something.
Daryl. Yeah. I'll put him in the show notes. But he saw a UFO when he was younger, and that was kind of the trigger for him to start channeling.
Right.
And I'm sure there's a YouTube video out there that goes well into that description, but it was kind of like a pre-life contract that he had set up with this other being, Bashar, which is actually him. But
right.
It's complicated, but yeah, it's interesting how there's all these similar scenarios happening with other people too, and
right,
it's
exactly.
kind of like starting this whole awakening, I guess you would call it. But
yeah, definitely. And it's go ahead.
No, yeah, I just want to throw in a few other things too. The the sleep paralysis.
Right.
I had that several times when I was really young, like 10 years old or so, and that it's just like those pictures that your paintings that you had,
right,
and then,
right,
and then the classic art that you compared it to, and it's like that. I remember seeing that when being younger too, and I think somebody was trying to scare me. It was probably an uncle or something, but like, oh yeah, if you wake up in the middle of the night and you can't move, it's a demon on your chest, that kind of thing.
Right.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
But that probably set me back like 20 years.
Yeah, I was going to say that's not very good, right?
But yeah, it's just interesting, and you did a terrific job with your own paintings and your thesis.
Oh, thank you.
I highly suggest everybody check them out. The artistry is just amazing, especially I'm jumping all over here, but the guy with the brick.
Oh right, yeah.
The mop. Oh, yeah. Are you selling this work or?
Yeah, I am. I'm trying to.
Okay.
I just finished my master's degree, so a lot of the work was tied up in being made, and then you have the thesis show, and there was a couple student shows that the stuff has been in, but there hasn't been a lot of focus on trying to sell it, just because it was primarily student work. But now that I've kind of got this body of work completed, I'm starting to show it. There's a local gallery just in our little small town here that's opening up, and it's a good friend of mine, and he's wanting to kind of showcase a variety of different artworks. It's not an LA gallery, but it's a gallery, and I'm kind of glad for that, because towards the end of my program, I started having second thoughts about painting. I was, I'd spend 8 hours a day painting, and after a while you're holding this little brush, basically you're a giant printer in some ways, you know what I mean? It's like, what am I really doing here? And eventually this thing that I'm spending so much time on is just going to go. I mean, the goal of most fine art is it's going to go to some wealthy person, and they're going to spend a lot of money on it because they can afford it. And that's going to be kind of the extent of it. And that just hasn't quite set right with me. I want more people to touch it and to see it and to be able to interact with it, because I'm not just doing it to make money. I'm partly doing it, honestly, just to get some of these ideas out of me without talking about them directly, because you guys, I'm sure, are well aware you can only talk about some of this with certain people before they start to glaze over and shut down.
Yep.
So this is kind of my secret way of doing it. I can make a painting. And at my thesis show was actually really interesting because a lot of people, especially the one with the brick, they were kind of intrigued by it and they wanted to know more about it. So it's kind of a Kickstarter for a conversation. And I, of course, try to gauge maybe where they're at. And I try not to throw too many terms at them like astral projection and out of body, but I still kind of work up towards that. And a lot of people are genuinely interested, and a lot of people, will say, oh yeah, my sister is into that kind of stuff, or oh yeah, I think I've had that before at nighttime. So it creates kind of a spark in people, and maybe relights a flame that maybe, is dwindling away, as we get wrapped up in the day-to-day business of our lives. And then it goes back to the quote that's in your video from William Buellman about being on the train ride for 70 years and not really having any clue where you're going. And that's what I think a lot of us do. So my hope is that something about my artwork might spark some interest or remind people of something strange that happened to them, and then, get them to ask a question, which we all know can sometimes snowball into some pretty big life-changing events. So that's my hope with what the artwork might do. But I also found that through painting for so many hours that I didn't really like painting itself. I liked the ideas behind the painting. I liked to come up with the images and what different objects might mean to different people. And then when I started writing my thesis, I was just like, wow, I love to write. I mean, when I write, I look forward to it and I want to sit down and just spend hours writing, whereas painting gets kind of monotonous after a while, because I really formulated the paintings in my head, and I used a lot of photography and Photoshop and move things around. And then as I paint them, I make adjustments too. But usually when I start to paint it, it's already kind of solidified. The concepts are all resolved. The meanings that, like the mop bucket or the brick, have kind of been processed in my mind, and it's where I want them to be. But when it comes time to painting, it's kind of just like, you draw the plans to build a house, but then you got to build the stupid thing, and spend all the time putting up the lumber and stuff. So anyway, the thesis has kind of sparked an interest in writing, and I've started working on a number of different books. Haven't published them yet, but I'm close with one of them. So I'm really excited to see how it's received and to see what people think of it and kind of go from there.
That's great. Yeah, I have to say, I went through your portfolio first before I read your thesis, and just looking at your paintings, like you said, when kind of you're standing next to Tom, you feel like you don't really have to talk. The paintings, to me, I was looking at them and thinking, this is exactly, he's telling some of his experiences. And I could get a feel for, especially the one of I think it looked like almost like a dog or a wolf coming through the doorway with the fire.
Yes,
and
yes.
I knew, and I'm assuming this is what it meant, but, it resonated with me because I understood that to be almost like an encounter with fear in the out-of-body state.
That's exactly what it was, yeah.
So I felt like as I was going through your portfolio, I could see I could just understand and see the story. And then actually reading the thesis and then how you embedded your artwork into it and explained it, one of the most shocking paintings was Old Hag for me.
Oh.
So, and I just want to talk about it a little bit because it freaked me out when I read your description, because it was the way that you described the meaning of the painting was exactly how I saw it and in the same order that you wrote about it. And, people really have to check this painting out, because I was looking at it and, you're right. It's like, oh my gosh, there's somebody singing, he's playing the guitar. This looks like a great time. And, there's this beautiful woman holding this wine. And then I look over and I can never pronounce the name of that. How do you pronounce it? The
Didgeridoo. Yeah.
Didgeridoo. Yeah. And I was like, and then all of a sudden I could hear like the sounds in the painting. I'm like, wow, all right. Oh, now he's got, like the shoes are tapping on. I'm like, wow, this looks great. And then all of a sudden I look deeper and I gasped and I'm like, oh my God, she's sitting on a man. I didn't see it at first. And I was like, holy crap, what is this? And then all of a sudden I look darker at who she's sitting on. And then bam, right away, there's the cat. And then I didn't see the cat at first. And then my eyes go to the people in the masks and then the weird horse. And I'm like, this is weird. This is eerie. Yeah. And then I went over to the Buddha. So it was kind of fascinating to experience it and look at it. And the whole thing kind of changed, and it went from fun to a little weird and eerie. And okay, now what the heck is going on here? And I could kind of hear the sounds and then get those feelings. And when I read your thesis and the way that you described it, it was exactly how I experienced it. So that was really cool.
That's amazing. I mean, that means a lot to hear you say that it, might have actually worked on somebody, what I was trying to do. So that's nice to hear.
Yeah, it freaked me out a little bit.
I wasn't trying to freak you out. So.
That was interesting how, because I had almost the same view of it, because I saw all the characters on the edges, and then the horse, and it was the woman sitting on the man was like the last thing I saw, and that's like dead center in the painting almost. And
right.
It's like, wow, it's amazing how you were able to direct our eyes with the I'm assuming because the middle is kind of darker and the outer edge is a little brighter, but yeah, no, that's a pretty good skill.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
It's interesting it's interesting how painting relates to out-of-body experiences or any kind of intuitive or non-physical experiences, because there's so much symbolism and metaphor in those types of experiences, and we tend to put our own symbols and metaphors into them, but there's also some kind of universal ones that you can grab people's attention with. And that's one thing I find exciting about painting is, you can just put a Buddha there. It doesn't have to mean anything,
right?
But just it means so much to so many people culturally that it sends people in the right direction, and they don't have to arrive at an exact point, but it kind of it changes the feel of everything. So all of those little elements were a lot of fun to try to figure out where to place them and what to do with them. And I have to give a lot of credit to my mentor at Laguna College of Art and Design. His name is Peter Zukoski. He guided me through a lot of these paintings, and it's funny because LCAD, that's the school, they kind of focus on representational figurative artwork, which basically means you're making work that looks like real things. You're working from life. You're painting, nude models and that kind of stuff. And it's more of a traditional approach than a lot of art schools nowadays. But the cool thing is that even though that's the case, having Peter help me out, he brings in he encourages you to you can still make it really deeply conceptual, even though it's representative of something. It doesn't have to be expressive and, paint splatters, which is great too. But he just kind of opened my eyes to that representational art can be hugely expressive and contain a lot of deep meaning that's hidden under the layers. So anyway, he's doing a great job there, and he's a super good guy. In fact, just real quick, he brought Tom Campbell in to do a lecture in our surrealism class. Tom was originally going to do it in person, but there was a change in plans, but he did it over Skype. So, here's this classroom of artists that had to watch some of his videos for homework and had a 3-hour session with Tom Campbell. So that was a lot of fun.
It's cool. And, I wanted to ask, how was your thesis received? What like, what was the feedback that you got? Was it unlike any other thesis that your professors have read? And I'm just curious to know what they thought.
Well, I got a lot of good feedback. The lady that's in charge of the thesis part of the program helped me a lot, of course, work on sentence structure and that kind of thing. But she really enjoyed it and was really impressed with my ability to write, which I've always liked to write, but I've never really done it, I guess, to a full degree. And then, Peter said it was one of the best that he's read. But it's kind of unfair because I have all of these, cool experiences to talk about, which people, enjoy to read about, I'm sure. But it's been interesting because a lot of times these thesis papers go into the database at the school, the library, or they get put back on some dusty shelf. And for the most part aren't really read ever again, because all you really need is your artwork and a one-page artist statement. But I decided to post my thesis on Facebook and put it on my website because I really wanted to see, for one, what people's reaction was to the thesis itself and get feedback about the writing and that kind of thing. So I've had a lot of Facebook friends and kind of random internet connections contact me and say, "Oh, wow, I read your thesis. It was so great. I've had a couple of those experiences too, and it was really neat to read about, how you've figured some of it out, and or some people could totally relate because they've read Tom's work. And then there's people like family members that have read it and they don't have as much to say, but you can tell that it's got them thinking. You know what I mean? It's got them considering some of these things. So it's all in all, I feel like it's been received pretty well. So I know it's different than a lot of theses that have been written at the school, but I don't know. It was definitely fun to write. So
Yeah, I wanted to ask how is like your family and friends taking this journey?
the strangeness,
Yeah, yeah.
pretty
How?
well,
Okay.
pretty good. I mean, I of course talk to my kids about this kind of stuff a lot. I try not to press it on them, but my my son will say I had a bad dream or something like that, and I'll say, well, you can try to become aware in your dreams, and a bad dream is a good time to try. When you feel yourself really scared, just try to remind yourself that you're dreaming. So it's fun to kind of plant these little seeds in my kids. I don't preach it to them, and I don't, we don't sit down and read My Big Toe and Bob Monroe every Sunday or anything like that. But they're important concepts that apply to life in general. That I think can really help kids nowadays kind of have a larger view as they proceed through life. So for my kids, I feel like it connects with them just enough that it'll have some impact on their choices later. But in terms of, parents and siblings and my wife and that kind of stuff, they're kind of coming around to some of the ideas. And as they ask questions about certain things, I'll do my best to answer. For example, they might ask something about Tom or My Big Toe, and I'll try to answer to the best of my ability what Tom and My Big Toe say about a certain subject or what my experience is about it. And I think a lot of it has to do with how you deliver it. If you deliver it kind of gently and, I don't know, without a lot of force, people would tend to be more open to it and just kind of say, yeah, this is what I found. I don't really know what's going on, but from the best that I can tell, this seems to be the thing that makes the most sense. And I think that kind of loosens them up a little bit, as opposed to saying, well, I'm certain that reincarnation exists, and I know there's a larger consciousness system, and, demanding that all these things be true kind of scares people away. So I've tried that tactic, and it seems to work for the most part. And it's true. I don't really claim to know any of these things at all. I just know my own experiences and kind of move forward with what seems to be most probable. There's all kinds of different variety of potential solutions that might answer the big mysteries of life. So the best I think any of us can do is just kind of find the one that seems to resonate and make the most sense based on our experiences and the data, and just kind of move forward towards that, holding it lightly, knowing that it'll probably change or evolve as we do. My wife it's funny because I'm pretty much a right-brained kind of creative person, and she is too, but she's a pediatrician, so she's got more of a medical, scientific left brain mind. And so it's hard for her to hear a lot of this stuff, and she kind of wants to see, yeah, but how do you know? Where's the evidence? This kind of thing. So I'll try to show her some Brian Whitworth papers and some other papers about virtual reality, and it's hard for her to swallow, I think, sometimes. So, but she's kind of it's interesting. We're on two different paths that feed off of each other. She's more on a path of compassion. She's a forensic pediatrician, so she specifically does child abuse cases and testifies as an expert witness in court and sees these kids that have been, tortured, abused, murdered sometimes. So she carries this, this weight around, and that's her primary focus. So for me to say, hey, you should meditate and, try out lucid dreaming, it's kind of silly. Like, who am I to suggest that to her? So instead, I think what happens is I watch her, and I watch her passion and her drive to put all these, these kids and this bigger picture of having kids taken care of better, putting that first before herself. And I feed off of that energy, and it teaches me maybe some things I need to work on. And then I think she feeds off of my energy of constantly seeking and questioning and being curious. And also kind of maybe my more intuitive side where, she wants me to explain why I think we should buy, a certain house, for example. And I tell her, I don't know. I just know. I can just feel it. So I think she feeds off of some of that too. So anyway, I feel like our paths intermingle together, and even though they're really different paths, they support each other, and we kind of feed off of it. So it's kind of a nice dynamic back and forth.
And your thesis, if I said that right, you had a line in there where it was like either two things, either
Yeah.
You're losing your mind and having hallucinations, and I kind of had the same thought there too. It's
Right.
like, well, because I don't know, way back when, maybe even 2010 was when probably the people around me started really understanding this, I
Right.
guess, and became more of a conversation. But before that, it's like I would go talk to people. It's like, oh yeah, I'm doing this film. It's about near-death experiences, and they're like, what? What are you doing? Like, you don't really believe that stuff, do
Right.
you? So I was constantly being almost bombarded every time I brought it up, or they're like, oh, you still working on that film? Whatever. And
Yeah.
I was always felt like there was a skeptic that I had to deal with.
Right.
I mean, there was small pockets of family members I could talk to, and some friends, and of course now, 5-6 years later, it's you can pretty much go to anybody on the street and say, oh, you ever hear about lucid dreaming, or
Yeah.
and they're like, oh yeah, well, so and so of mine had he died and came back, and they saw the light, and
Right.
that whole thing. But it's just amazing now how everything's been shifted, and it's like more and
Yeah.
more people are understanding it, I guess.
No, definitely. I think that, I mean, I know that I hesitate to say this because I know that people probably throughout the ages have felt like this, there's big stuff happening right now in my lifetime, and this is really exciting. But I really feel like there is a big thing happening right now. And I know in the metaphysical world, it's, it might be called a shift in consciousness. And, then there was the Mayan calendar thing and all these sort of things, earth changes and that kind of stuff that's prevalent in metaphysics. But then there's also the physics side that Tom Campbell talks about a lot, where we're like at the cusp of a completely different paradigm that'll make going from a flat earth to a round earth look minuscule in comparison. And if you follow the trail of that paradigm, if it goes from, or the understanding that reality is virtual, it just kind of, it's a natural flow that next it's people are going to figure out that consciousness is fundamental. And then from there, it's like, well, what does that mean? It starts to become kind of obvious that, oh, consciousness is evolving and growing, and that fits in with this idea that we're here to love and grow and become better, basically. So I think there's a lot of stuff happening at the same time, and you add things like the internet and technology. It's kind of like everything's hitting at one time. So I'm excited to see where it's all going to go, and I feel like, and I think Tom's mentioned this, it could go good or it could go bad. I mean, it's kind of up to us. It's not necessarily a free lunch where somebody flicks a switch in the larger consciousness system and everybody's a little bit nicer and smarter. But I think that it's kind of like we've been given the information that we need to take it to the right place. And like you said, it has to do with like the films you guys are making and the fact that more and more people are starting to say, oh yeah, I've heard about that, or yeah, I've been trying to do that myself, or you know what I mean? It's kind of bringing it all into the limelight. So I think it's really exciting times.
Yeah, can you give us maybe a little sneak peek of what the book is that you're writing? Because maybe we'll have you come back on to promote it or to explain what it is, but would you like to give us a little hint?
Sure. Well, I kind of just, once I started writing my thesis, which, is like it's a 2-year process, basically. You pretty much start writing it when you start the program, but you don't get to the real meat of it until the end when you really know what you're doing in terms of artwork. But during that time, I started writing because I just realized I loved it so much. So what I did first is I just kind of did free writing. I just wrote what was on my mind. And one of the first time I did that, or the first, I guess, story that I did like that evolved into kind of a short story / novella. It's like, I think it's 17,000 words now. So I've been tinkering with that for, I don't know, a year now, off and on. And then I started probably, I think, 4 or maybe 5 other stories where the meat of the story's there. I just need to go back in and fill in some of the gaps. So basically what those are they're fictional stories, but it's kind of like the paintings in a way. I'm presenting something that could be read by a wide audience, but I'm also sneaking in things to kind of open their mind and to maybe help them consider certain ideas. So I wouldn't even know what to compare it to, but I guess my hope is that, like back when I was in the Navy and I was reading some of these books, I came across a few books like, The Way of the Peaceful Warrior, I think that's the title, The Celestine Prophecy, and then some books by Mary Summer Rain. And a lot of them, they were fiction, but they were telling a story that really helped me along and opened my eyes to a lot of things. So my hope is that these books will kind of serve the same purpose for people. So in some ways, I'm taking the ideas that you might find in My Big Toe and the ideas and conclusions that I've come to on my own and presenting them to people in story format so that they might pick up those conclusions as if they did it on their own and didn't actually have somebody tell them or suggest them. So, they kind of make the discovery or they process it in their own mind and come to the conclusion on their own. So that's kind of the idea behind it. And then eventually I'd like to write a nonfiction book, or at least that's kind of burning in the back of my mind. And it would be something along the lines of kind of tongue-in-cheek, like a guidebook to physical reality. And just, it would be a compilation of some of the big ideas that are prevalent in physics, but also some of the ancient teachings and just the basic concepts that help or have helped me, and I've seen it help other people get through your day-to-day life. Like one of the things that Tom Campbell has said, and I don't know if I'll quote it right, but it's something along the lines of, it's a very simple thing that we have to do here. Stuff happens and we get to deal with it. Most of the time, we focus on the stuff that happens when really we should be focusing on how we deal with it. So it's kind of in that genre of how do you deal with life and how do you deal with fear? How do you deal with everyday frustrations? So that kind of thing. So that's in the back of my mind kind of poking at me. But I feel like I've got a lot of stuff to work on myself to be able to even talk about it more in depth. So that's exciting because I kind of feel like I'm going into a phase where I'm going to do a lot of deep searching within myself and transformation, so that way I can kind of talk about it in a practical sense. So that's down the road somewhere, hopefully.
That's great. And I just want to remind people that you heard him first here on the Path 11 podcast.
Well, we'll see if that means anything.
Yeah. So, Justin, do you want to let people know where they can find your art and read your thesis?
Sure. My art website is my full name, which is justinsnodgrass.com. And I've got my artwork on there. And then I think on that website, on the About page, is at the bottom is where the link to my thesis paper is. And then, of course, I'm on Facebook as well. And a lot of my artwork's on there, too. And that's how people can get a hold of me if they're interested.
Great. Well, thanks so much for coming on and supporting our work and being a fan. And it's always great to have this type of synchronistic, connection.
Yes, definitely. Well, thank you guys. I appreciate it. And I love your work. So it was an honor to talk to you guys.
If you'd like more information about our films or to purchase our DVDs, you can head on over to our website at thepathseries.com. They're also available to purchase on Amazon.com.
Our films are also streaming online at Vimeo.com, GaiamTV.com, and iTunes.
If you have a show suggestion or would like us to interview someone specifically, please feel free to shoot us an email at info@thepathseries.com or send us a tweet at thepathseries.
Please rate and review us in iTunes and subscribe.
We hope you enjoyed the show.